What do you do with the data related to the accounts payable process three-way matches that go wrong, i.e., when you match the invoice against the purchase order and the receiving document and they don't match? There's a wealth of business intelligence in that data if you choose to collect and analyze it. And I'm sure you're going to realize that I'm going to recommend that you do that. It can and should be used to drive process improvements across your entire procure to pay chain, not just the accounts payable function. In this episode, we'll show you why you should analyze the data and a rather simple way to do it. Stick around until the end when we share how you can use this data to fix problems not only in your accounts payable shop, but in parts of your purchasing organization and with some of your suppliers' billing group. Hey guys, I'm Mary Schaefer, founder of AP Now, the place where we curate the latest business intelligence for those who work in, manage, or have responsibility for the payment and or the accounts payable function. So let's dive right in and let's talk about tracking discrepant invoices. You absolutely should be tracking them. You can do it in your ERP system if you have the functionality to do that, but many ERP systems don't have the functionality, and so someone, usually the accounts payable manager, does it in a separate spreadsheet. You can just do it in a simple Excel spreadsheet. And you want to do this for a number of reasons. Obviously, you want to get the invoices discrepancies resolved, but you also want to do it in a timely manner. Because if you don't do it in a timely manner and the due date passes, the vendor will send a second invoice. So you'll have one copy of the invoice, and then you'll get another copy of the invoice. And if it still is not resolved by, let's say, 60 days, if payment was due at 30 days, you'll get still another copy of the invoice. And maybe you'll get more than them. So a lot of extra work, a lot of extra invoices, and occasionally some of those invoices get paid twice, those second and third copies, and we absolutely don't want to do it. So here's how you can do it. Let's assume that the accounts payable manager, the director of accounts payable, maybe an assistant controller is going to do it. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a spreadsheet and you're going to keep track of the discrepant invoices and who's supposed to resolve them. Now, I'm not going to start ranting and raving about the fact that most of the time the responsibility for resolving discrepant invoices lies in accounts payable, when accounts payable is the group or the person who has the least amount of information, be that as it may, but it's usually in accounts payable. And you're going to create this spreadsheet and you're going to have columns across the top and you're going to try and capture every possible piece of information. So you'll have the invoice, the date that you got it, who was the purchaser, who was the supplier, who was the AP person, and any other relevant people who were associated with this. Then you're going to put common reasons why the match might fail. Let's say inaccurate invoice, pricing error. There's a million other reasons. You know what they are. And a lot of them will be peculiar to your organization. You're also going to date this. You're going to date when the invoice came in, when the problem was identified, when the emails were sent out either to purchasing or to your supplier to try and get it resolved. And you're going to keep track of this. You can use this for two reasons. Number one, for tracking purposes, to make sure that you get these discrepancies resolved in a decent amount of time quickly, so you don't get those second invoices that I talked about. And also for analytical purposes, so that you can try and use them as I'm about to describe. You're going to have a comment field also in this. And you are also going to put dates down when the problem was identified, how long it took different people to respond, and when it was resolved. Okay. And you want to make sure your invoices don't languish, and you also want to collect this data. Now, periodically, and what I mean by periodically will depend upon your organization. If you only have one or two discrepant invoices, let's say a month, well, this is going to work for you. But I suspect if you're like 99.75% of the people who I encounter, this is not the case. So periodically, it could be weekly, it could be monthly, it could be quarterly, depending upon what your workflow is, what other work you're doing, and the nature of your business. You're going to pull the spreadsheet out and you're going to review it, and you're going to sort the data and try and identify common problems. So, for example, you might sort the data and review by reason for the discrepancy, which, by the way, you're going to enter onto the spreadsheet afterwards when the item is resolved. So a little extra work maybe in keeping the spreadsheet up. Maybe then you'll discover that one of your processes in AP has an inordinate amount of the problems. Or perhaps you're having poor purchase orders come out of a particular unit in purchasing, whatever. You're going to review this data. Now, before we get to how you can use this data, if you like this episode, please give us a thumbs up. And if you loved it, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We produce new content for the channel 3 times a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays are devoted to payments and accounts payable issues, and Saturdays are reserved for Wordle. By the way, your thumbs up and comments really help us, as YouTube takes that as a signal to distribute this content to more viewers, because if you're happy, they think maybe somebody else will be happy of it. Okay, so now you've identified the problem and you need to take action. Now, I would strongly suggest that you start with any problems that may be in AP, so that when people start pointing fingers and saying, well, did you look in your own house? You have some data to back it up and say, yes, we did, and we fixed our problems. So if the problem is in accounts payable, is it with one person, one group? You want to talk to that person, maybe even if it's just like one particular processor and maybe their manager, and see what's the problem. Do we need more training? Maybe that person was new and didn't get adequate training. Maybe you had an automation solution and the training that you was given was, good for 6 of the people on your staff, but this one person didn't understand something. Or maybe they're sloppy and they just need to take more care. But be very careful about assuming, that somebody is sloppy. Maybe getting 2 screens for your processes. Maybe that would help. I was on a call this morning where I heard people are talking about getting 3 screens and a few people even getting 4 screens. So you can see where we're going with that. Okay, so that's, once you've narrowed down your AP issue. Now, let's say the problem was inaccurate purchase orders. Let's say that's what you discovered was the problem. Maybe in this case, the supplier is notifying purchasing of pricing errors, and rather than issuing a corrected purchase order, the purchasing person figures, accounts payable will catch it. Well, that's not acceptable. That creates more work for AP, and it also increases the chances that maybe something will slip through and you'll pay more than you should. So maybe there's one area in purchasing. Maybe one location is making all the mistakes. And in that case, maybe there was more training that's needed. So there are many different reasons. Once you identify the reason, then you can talk very tactfully, I might add, to the group involved and try and get that fixed so that the errors related to that particular cause are, I want to say eliminated, but from my lips to God's ears. Okay. Now, if the problem is with the invoices, you need to tread very carefully because you don't want to offend the supplier, especially if it's a large supplier. And this might be something that you might have to work with purchasing and maybe approach them together. And it could be, honestly, that you'll talk to them and nothing changes. And, you can't make them do something. I mean, maybe you cannot do business with them, but I doubt that the organization is going to decide not to do business with them because accounts payable isn't happy with the invoices that they sent. Just a sad fact of life. So keep in mind that even after you talk to them, you may not be able to fix the problem. And if you can't, okay, this doesn't mean, just give up. Just make a note of who that vendor is. You won't have a lot of them. There'll only be a few that will fall into this category. And then once you know who they are, you always double and triple check their invoices. Yes, it's extra work, but you don't want to pay them twice. Clearly, that's an unacceptable outcome. Now, we recently did a video on 3 reasons invoices get paid twice. You can watch it now using the link that will appear momentarily on YouTube and is in the show notes below. As always, we appreciate your thumbs up, your subscribes, your shares, and your comments. Good luck.